The message arrived at 7:42 a.m., just as I was stirring honey into my tea. Don't come to my wedding. My fiancé doesn't feel comfortable seeing you. Please respect our decision. I read it twice. Then a third time. My hand froze mid-air, the spoon clinking softly against the cup. Don't come to my wedding. I had raised Daniel alone since he was 12 years old. His father, my husband Michael, had collapsed from a sudden heart attack one winter evening and never came home again. From that day forward, it was just the two of us against the world. I worked relentlessly, managing a regional bank branch by day, handling private bookkeeping work by night, so my son would never feel the absence of stability, opportunity, or love. And now, with one text message, I was being erased. I didn't respond immediately. I needed to breathe first. To understand how a child who once cried in my arms over scraped knees could so casually exile me from the most important day of his life. Daniel and I had been close, at least, I thought we were. Weekly calls every Sunday evening. Holiday visits without fail. He used to joke that I was his emergency contact for everything. That started changing 8 months ago, when he met Lena. At first, I was relieved. Daniel was 30 and had never been serious about settling down. When he told me he'd met someone, I was genuinely happy. When he brought her to dinner a few months later, I noticed small things, things easy to dismiss if you weren't paying attention. Lena answered questions meant for Daniel. Corrected him when he spoke about his childhood. Once, when he mentioned that I managed a bank, she laughed lightly and said, "You told me she was just an employee there." Daniel looked confused but said nothing. I told myself I was imagining things. Over time, the calls became shorter. Sometimes, Lena's voice hovered in the background, commenting on our conversations. "You just talked to her yesterday," I'd hear her say. Eventually, even holidays became negotiable. Then came the engagement, announced via text. No phone call. No visit. Just a photo of a diamond ring that cost more than Daniel could reasonably afford. Wedding in 3 months. Small ceremony. 3 months felt rushed, but I offered support anyway. I told Daniel I'd saved for his wedding for years. Lena responded politely, but firmly, that they wanted to do things independently. Independently. Within weeks, I was excluded from everything. Guest lists. Planning. Even basic updates. When I asked Daniel directly, his tone shifted. "You're being controlling, Mom. Lena and I need space." That word, controlling, cut deeper than he knew. Then came the text. I tried calling him. Straight to voicemail. I sent messages. Nothing. 2 sleepless nights passed as I replayed every interaction, searching desperately for something I'd done wrong. On the 3rd morning, something inside me hardened. I wasn't just hurt anymore. I was alert. I still had professional connections at the bank. And Daniel, years ago, had insisted I remain on a few joint accounts just in case. I logged in and reviewed everything quietly. The numbers didn't sit right. So I made a call. Within an hour, every joint account linked to my name was closed. $71,000, money I had saved for Daniel's future, was transferred back under my control. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt cautious. That evening, I sat in my living room surrounded by framed photos of a life I thought I understood. I realized something unsettling. The son who sent that text wasn't acting like himself. This wasn't independence. This was isolation. I opened my laptop and began documenting everything, timelines, financial connections, conversations. I titled the file Daniel Protection Plan. I didn't know yet how far this would go. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. If someone thought they could manipulate my son by cutting me out, they had gravely underestimated me. What I discovered next, about Lena's finances, her past, and her sudden interest in Daniel's money, would prove that the wedding wasn't rushed for love, it was rushed for access. The first real crack appeared the morning after I closed the accounts. My phone rang just after 9. The caller ID showed the number of my old bank branch. I answered calmly, already sensing what this was about. "Mrs. Harris," the woman said carefully, "this is Elaine from Account Security. We flagged multiple failed login attempts on a joint account that was closed yesterday. The password entered was correct." My grip tightened. Where did the attempts come from? She hesitated. An IP address traced to downtown, near Daniel's apartment. Daniel lived there. But Daniel was at work during those hours, which meant someone else had his credentials. After I hung up, I sat very still. I wasn't angry yet. I was focused. Banking had taught me one thing well: patterns always tell the truth. I opened Lena's public social media accounts. At first glance, everything looked polished: designer handbags, rooftop dinners, luxury vacations. But when I started scrolling backward, the timing caught my attention. Her lifestyle didn't match Daniel's income. Then I noticed the dates. She had dated an older real estate investor before Daniel, someone whose name I recognized from a bankruptcy article months ago. Her posts with him stopped abruptly. Exactly 2 weeks later, her first photo with my son appeared. Coincidence stopped being convincing. I pulled out the folder of financial documents I'd kept for years. I was still co-signed on Daniel's car loan. Still listed on his apartment lease. And most importantly, the trust I'd set up for him at birth, assets that would not legally transfer until he turned 32. Assets Lena couldn't touch. Unless she thought otherwise. I called my attorney, Martin Klein, a man who had handled my husband's estate and trusted me enough not to ask unnecessary questions. "I need to secure my son's financial future," I told him. Quietly. By noon the next day, trust amendments were in motion. Daniel's inheritance would be protected as separate property under all circumstances. No spouse could ever claim it. Then Martin said something that confirmed what my instincts already knew. "If you're worried about exploitation, you may want to involve a private investigator." I didn't hesitate. Her name was Rachel Diaz, and she came recommended by 2 people I trusted. She listened without judgment, then nodded once. "Give me 48 hours," she said. "But I need you prepared for what I might find." She didn't need to warn me. I was already braced. She called me back in 36. "Mrs. Harris," she said quietly, "I'd rather show you this in person." When I arrived at her office, documents were spread across the table like evidence from a crime scene. First, a credit report. Lena had over $45,000 in credit card debt. Most of it recent. Several accounts were already in collections. Next, an eviction notice from 6 months before she met Daniel. Then photographs, screenshots of social media posts aligned with financial records. Luxury purchases made just days after large unexplained deposits appeared in Daniel's account. And finally, the document that made my hands go cold. A loan application. $50,000. Submitted in Daniel's name. Denied due to income ratio. The contact email. Lena's. The signature. Not Daniel's. This is identity fraud, Rachel said calmly. Documented. Clear. The room felt smaller. My son wasn't just being manipulated, he was being used. Why the rush to marry? I asked. Rachel pulled up one more file. She told vendors she needed to be legally married before the end of the month due to an inheritance clause from Daniel's grandmother. My mother had passed away 15 years earlier. There was no such clause. That lie wasn't random. It was strategic. She needs the marriage certificate, Rachel said. Access. Legitimacy. Time. I left with copies of everything and one brutal truth settling in my chest. Daniel was in real danger, financially and emotionally. That night, we sent Daniel a registered letter through my attorney. It outlined the evidence, offered a meeting, and warned him, professionally, not emotionally, of potential legal consequences. The next morning, my phone rang. It was Lena. How dare you harass us with legal threats, she snapped. The letter was addressed to Daniel, I replied evenly. Have him call me. He doesn't want to speak to you, she said sharply. You're a bitter, controlling woman who can't stand seeing him happy. I smiled for the first time in days. Because panic always sounds like anger. She hung up. And in that moment, I knew something important. I hadn't lost control. I'd taken it back. But Lena wasn't finished yet. Her next move would be bolder, crueler, and it would force a confrontation that would either save my son or lose him forever. The confrontation came sooner than I expected. 3 nights after the legal letter was delivered, my doorbell rang just after 8 p.m. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I looked through the window, my heart lurched. Daniel's car sat in the driveway. I opened the door to find my son standing there, rigid, exhausted, eyes shadowed. And beside him, Lena. Her hand was wrapped tightly around his arm, possessive, deliberate. We need to talk, Daniel said. His voice sounded rehearsed. Of course, I replied, stepping aside. They entered my living room like strangers. Lena sat first, crossing her legs as if she owned the space. Daniel remained standing, torn between us. You've crossed a serious line, Lena began immediately. Filing reports. Hiring investigators. Sabotaging Daniel's finances. I didn't sabotage anything, I said calmly. I documented facts. This is elder abuse, she snapped. We could sue you. I almost laughed. Almost. I turned to Daniel. Did you give Lena permission to apply for a $50,000 loan in your name? He blinked. What loan? Lena's grip tightened. We talked about that, remember? Wedding expenses. Daniel shook his head slowly. No. We didn't. The silence that followed was heavy. I walked to my desk and returned with the folder Rachel had prepared. I placed it in Daniel's hands. Read it. All of it. Lena lunged to grab it, but Daniel pulled it away. As he read, I watched the truth land, line by line. His expression shifted from confusion to shock, then something darker. This says you tried to access my bank accounts, he said quietly. That you forged my signature. It's fabricated, Lena snapped. She paid someone to make this up. The credit report is official, I said gently. The bank logs are verified. This isn't opinion, Daniel. It's documentation. Lena stood abruptly. You're choosing her lies over me? Tears appeared instantly, too fast, too perfect. If you believe her, she sobbed, we're done. Right now. There it was. The ultimatum. Daniel looked between us, his hands shaking. I need time, he said finally. No, Lena hissed. You choose. Right now. He didn't answer. She grabbed her bag. We are leaving. At the door, Daniel hesitated, just long enough for hope to flicker. But she called his name sharply, and he followed her out. The folder remained on my coffee table. I sat there long after they left, unsure whether I had just saved my son, or pushed him further into danger. 3 days passed. No contact. Then my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Daniel doesn't want you in his life. Stop harassing us, or I'll file for a restraining order. I saved it. Evidence. 2 days later, an email arrived from Lena, polite, conciliatory. She wanted peace. She wanted me at the wedding. All she needed was a contribution, $30,000, and an apology. Classic. My attorney confirmed what I already knew. It was desperation disguised as reconciliation. I didn't respond. Instead, I waited. And desperation does not wait quietly. The next knock came 1 week before the wedding, early morning this time. Daniel looked worse. Sleepless. Hollow. Lena spoke for him. We want to move forward, she said smoothly. But first, you need to withdraw the police report and apologize. If I don't? I asked. Then you lose him. Forever. I turned to Daniel. Do you truly believe I lied? He swallowed. I don't know what to believe. Lena erupted. Accusations. Insults. Rage barely contained. That was when I knew. She was losing control. And manipulators become reckless when they feel the ground shifting. They left again, this time slamming the door. I called my attorney immediately and documented everything. That evening, my investigator called. Daniel contacted me, Rachel said. He asked me to review his bank statements. My breath caught. He's starting to see it, she continued. But what I found is worse than we thought. She sent the files. Transfers. Thousands of dollars. From Daniel's account, into Lena's. Timed perfectly with her credit card due dates. And one final transfer, $8,000, 3 days earlier. My phone rang again. He's meeting me tomorrow morning, Rachel said. Wedding day. That was when I realized. Daniel wasn't going to the altar. He was going to the truth. On the morning of the wedding, my son would finally confront reality, and what he discovered would end everything in a single, irreversible moment. I didn't sleep the night before the wedding. Not from fear, but from certainty. By morning, I knew something irreversible was coming. At 6 a.m., I dressed quietly and sat at my kitchen table, staring at the phone. At 9:48, Rachel texted me. He's here. I didn't interfere. I didn't call. I didn't follow them inside the cafe, where my son was finally facing the evidence without Lena's voice poisoning every sentence. 40 minutes later, Rachel sent another message. He knows. That was all. At 10:42 a.m., Daniel's car flew past my street and pulled into my driveway moments later. By the time I reached the porch, he was sitting on the steps with 2 suitcases beside him, his face buried in his hands. I'm so sorry, he whispered when he saw me. I didn't listen. I sat beside him and waited. She's been taking money for months, he said, voice breaking. Paying her debts. Lying. While I was meeting Rachel this morning, she called screaming, needed 8,000 immediately, or the wedding would be cancelled. And then I heard her. He swallowed hard. She was on the phone. She said, just get him married. We'll drain his accounts after the honeymoon. That sentence ended everything. I cancelled the wedding, he said. She doesn't know yet. My phone rang. Unknown number. I answered and put it on speaker. Where is he? Lena screamed. The ceremony starts in hours. He's safe, I replied calmly. And he knows. Silence. Then pleading. Then rage. Daniel took the phone. It's over. I heard you. I saw everything. Threats followed, lawsuits, ruin, revenge. I ended the call. The wedding never happened. The days that followed were chaos. Lena showed up once, screaming on my lawn. The police escorted her away. Daniel formally filed fraud charges. With his cooperation, the case was airtight. 6 months later, she was convicted. 4 years in prison. Restitution. A permanent restraining order. Daniel testified with quiet strength. He never looked at her. Life rebuilt itself slowly. Daniel healed. Learned boundaries. Learned what real love looked like. A year later, he met someone kind. Stable. Honest. Their wedding was small. In my backyard. Under the oak tree his father once planted. When Daniel held my hand and said, "You saved my life," I corrected him gently. "No," I said. "You saved yourself. I just refused to abandon you." Today, my life is peaceful. Full. Purpose-driven. And when people ask me what I learned, I tell them this. Love is not surrender. Silence is not kindness. And sometimes, protecting someone means being willing to be hated, temporarily. Because truth always wins. And manipulation always collapses. If you were in my place, would you have stayed quiet to keep the peace, or would you have fought, knowing the cost?